Linda had spent months swallowing her fear, enduring Dr. Steve Mercer's cruelty in silence, never imagining that anyone would truly stand up for her. But everything changed the moment a team of tactical operators swept through the hospital, and her brother Commander Sean Carter stepped out from behind them with the calm confidence of someone who had seen real battle. Mercer's face drained of color, his composure collapsing as he realized the man in front of him wasn't just a visitor. He was a Navy SEAL commander. For Linda, after so much humiliation, that moment felt like the world finally shifting back into place. But this moment was only the beginning. What happened before that confrontation and what led Sean to bring an entire tactical operation into a hospital reveals much deeper story waiting to be uncovered. But before we go any further, make sure to subscribe to the channel. Now let's understand how this story truly began. Linda Carter adjusted the strap of her freshly pressed scrub top, the laminated badge catching the fluorescent glare of St. Michael's Hospital. Her fingers trembled slightly subtle, almost imperceptible but enough to betray the weight of 6 years spent juggling textbooks, night shifts at diners, and relentless self-doubt. She inhaled, counting the sterile scent of antiseptic and the low hum of ventilators, a scent she had memorized in clinical rotations, but never like this, on the precipice of a career she had fought tooth and nail to earn. The first steps into the ward were a choreography of protocol and awareness. She nodded to passing nurses, consciously keeping her gaze forward, careful not to attract attention. The air shifted when Dr. Stephen Mercer entered, his presence a calibrated force. A tall frame in crisp white coat, eyes cold, scanning with clinical detachment, voice cutting as a scalpel. Nurses follow orders, they don't question. They don't speak. His words settled over her like a lead sheet, an invisible weight pressing against her lungs. Days blurred into relentless cycles of critique. Every chart annotation she made drew a line of judgment. Every procedure was dissected in the harsh glare of Mercer's standards. Other nurses' errors passed unnoticed, an intravenous line improperly secure, a misread vitals chart, but when Linda faltered by mere seconds or millimeters, Mercer's voice was there, a scalpel, precise and unforgiving. Each reprimand landed with the authority of seniority reinforced by tenure, the kind of authority that neutralizes opposition. In the break room, hushed voices trembled behind her back, the kind of murmurs that could punch her confidence. "Nobody can touch him," one nurse muttered. "He's untouchable." Exhaustion spilled from Linda's chest, escaping in a whisper she instantly regretted. "My brother could." Silence, a ripple of disbelief, then laughter, sharp and incredulous. "My brother's a SEAL commander," she added, voice low, almost a prayer. The room's tension snapped like a frayed wire. Laughter erupted, disbelief thick in the air. The door clicked. Mercer appeared, perfectly timed, the corners of his mouth curling into a smile that held more threat than amusement. "A SEAL commander, how fascinating," he said, eyes narrowing to slits of scrutiny. He took the chair opposite her, a predator calculating. "I did my residency at Balboa Naval Medical Center. I've treated more SEALs than you've treated patients. And I know you're lying." Linda's jaw tightened. Her pulse spiked. She forced steady, shallow breaths. "I'm not," she said, voice quivering despite her attempt at control. Mercer leaned back, tapping a pen against the table. "Prove it. Bring him in. He's deploy. Of course he is." Mercer's laugh was hollow, consuming the room. The invisible brother, the phantom commander. He rose, the shadow of his authority filling the doorway. "You're a liar, Carter, and I'll make sure everyone knows." By morning, the hospital's fluorescent-lit corridors were awash in whispers. Linda's claim, bold and impossible, hung in the air like an accusation. Everyone heard. No one believed. The hospital corridors were narrower than Linda remembered, or perhaps that was her perception, sharpened by the relentless focus on every eye that might glance her way. Mercer's presence had expanded into every corner, every assignment, a shadow she could not escape. Her schedule had been meticulously adjusted, a surgical precision in cruelty, double shifts on night duty, the critical ICU patients with unstable vitals, rooms where family members hovered with anxiety, the ones most likely to notice error, the ones who demanded competence. Every chart she completed, every line of documentation, was scrutinized. Every procedure performed became an opportunity for Mercer's precision strike critiques. During rounds, Mercer leaned over her shoulder as she inserted N4, the patient's child's eyes wide with fear, the mother gripping the side rail. Mercer's words cut through the sterile air. Again, Carter, slower, so even you can understand. His tone was a scalpel, calibrated to wound, not instruct. He waited, expression neutral, but his eyes flicked, calculating, observing the micro-tremor of her hands, the subtle tightening of her jaw, the shallow inhale before each measured movement. A single misalignment of tubing, a hesitation, a blink too slow. He catalogued everything. The other nurses avoided her, a current of social isolation flowing along the hallways. Conversation ceased mid-sentence when she approached. The whispers had a rhythm. The liar claims her brother is a SEAL. Don't get involved. No one would speak for her. No one would intervene. One night, the finality of the isolation struck as she approached her locker. A printed photograph, taped crudely, greeted her. A Navy SEAL, uniformed, with a clown nose drawn in red marker. Beneath it, scrawled letters, Linda's brother. Her hands shook visibly as she peeled the tape from the metal, her fingernails catching the edge, scraping lightly. She pressed the paper into the garbage, inhaling the antiseptic taint of the locker room, forcing herself to suppress the tremor in her limbs. Alone that night, she dialed Sean again, leaving a voice message. Hey, it's me. Things are hard. I know you're busy. I'm fine. Really. Each word was calibrated to minimize alarm, yet the cadence betrayed strain. Her jaw clenched as she replayed the message in her mind, recognizing the fissures she had tried to conceal. She was not fine. 3 days later, Mercer cornered her in the medication room, the stainless steel surfaces reflecting fluorescent light with clinical harshness. He leaned against the counter, the corners of his lips curling into a calculated smile, eyes glinting with a predator's focus. I spoke with administration, he said. Your probationary review is next month. I'll be submitting my evaluation. The words were soft, almost conversational, yet carried the weight of procedure and threat intertwined. I'd start updating your resume, Carter. His smile sharpened, the shadow at the edge of it revealing anticipation of impact rather than amusement. Linda's pulse ticked in rhythm with the fluorescent hum. Her voice was barely audible, a fragile thread. Why are you doing this? Mercer leaned closer, the movement imperceptibly precise, the scent of his cologne mingling with the sterile air. Because people like you need to learn their place. His statement lingered, a vector of intimidation, before he pivoted and walked out, leaving only the echo of controlled footsteps. That night, Linda sat on the edge of her bed in her apartment, knees drawn to her chest rising and falling in shallow, uneven breaths. The room smelled faintly of takeout and antiseptic from scrubs washed and hunted dry. Exhaustion had coagulated into something physical, a weight pressing on her shoulders, her eyelids, her spine. She allowed herself a moment of release, tears spilling quietly onto her palms, the whisper of frustration and helplessness filling the empty room. Her phone buzzed, an insistent vibration against the wooden nightstand. Unknown number. She hesitated, thumb hovering. She answered, voice taut. Linda, calm, measured, controlled. Sean. Her chest expanded briefly, a sharp inhale, as a layer of tension she didn't realize she carried started to unwind. It's Sean. I got your messages, all of them. She did not respond immediately. The room was silent except for the faint hum of the refrigerator and the occasional creak of the apartment settling. Her fingers gripped the phone like a lifeline, knuckles pale, pulse spiking. Tell me everything, he said. No preamble, no judgment. Just precision, just attention. Commander Sean Carter's body floated in the controlled stillness of the South China Sea, fins slicing silently through dark water, oxygen regulator hissing in precise rhythm. Around him, Trident Unit 7 maintained station, moving like shadows through the abyss, every gesture exact, every signal pre-programmed. His comms were dead except for internal channels, the world above completely muted. When the first message from Linda pinged the secure system, he did not hear it. Weeks passed, deployments blurred into operational haze, each day measured by tactical objectives, mission timelines, and environmental variables. It wasn't until 3 weeks later, seated in the dimly lit, secure briefing room at Naval Special Warfare Command in Coronado, that Sean replayed her 9 voicemails. The room smelled of electronics, paper, and the faint residue of decontamination protocols. The blinds were drawn. The hum of air circulation provided a constant, unobtrusive rhythm. His fingers hovered over the console as he played the messages sequentially. The first message, a careful, controlled cadence, tinged with nervous hope. Her voice quivered slightly at the edges, subtle micro-tremors betraying restraint. He noted the rise in pitch on stressed syllables, a subconscious alarm. The third, a deeper weariness, dull elongation signaling strain, pauses between phrases growing longer, like fractures in measured speech. By the sixth, she was breaking, the control eroding, the tight inflection of her words unraveling into desperation. The ninth left him frozen hollow, the careful tones of duty and professionalism stripped away, leaving a voice drained of energy, weighed by isolation and fear. Lieutenant Commander Marcus Webb, Sean's executive officer, leaned against the wall, fingers interlaced, studying the shift in his CO's expression. The slight tightening of Sean's jaw, the subtle tick at the corner of his left eye, the near imperceptible flare of nostrils microindicators of cognitive low and suppressed emotion. Problem? Webb asked, voice steady. Neutral, cataloging like a field report. Sean didn't answer. His thumb moved across the secure dial, entering the sequence that would reach her. Silence stretched as he waited for her voice to respond on the other end. When she answered, there was relief in her breath, a fragile veneer of composure. Her words were clipped, carefully measured, but the cadence betrayed everything. Sean, please don't. Full name, Linda. She hesitated, a shallow inhale punctuating the pause, a subtle clenching of her fist audible over the line. Stephen Mercer, but I don't want you to do anything crazy. I just needed to talk. I understand. I'll call you tomorrow. The click of disconnection was precise, final, leaving Linda's words suspended in his mind. Sean's fingers flexed around the phone, the leather of the seat pressing into his palms, grounding him. Webb raised an eyebrow, observing the shift in posture, the slight forward lean, shoulders rigid. How bad? Sean exhaled, controlled, bad enough. His fingers moved over the laptop, the screen illuminating a determined expression. Within the hour, he had compiled a dossier, medical school records, divorce filings, 3 prior HR complaints all resolved quietly with non-disclosure agreements and severance patterns aligning into a single, coherent profile. Mercer was a serial bully, shielded by tenure and institutional inertia. Webb scanned over his shoulder, eyes tracing the sequences of documented incidents, the alignment of administrative oversight and repeated victim reports. Protected by seniority, he noted, not anymore. Sean's voice was low, devoid of inflection, precise, calibrated. He closed the laptop with deliberate pressure, the snap resonating in the otherwise quiet room. He rose from the chair, shoulders squared, a controlled exhale releasing tension he never allowed to show. I need a favor from the team. Webb's lips curved slightly, a slow, measured acknowledgement. What kind of favor? Sean's gaze fixed, unblinking, each syllable weighted with authority. The kind that's technically legal, the words lingered. No further explanation necessary. Within the silent understanding of Trident Unit 7, lines between operational precision, tactical planning, and legal boundaries were always drawn and observed, yet the implication carried the force of inevitability. Sean Carter's operation unfolded with the precision of a man accustomed to hostile terrain and tight timelines. Even from thousands of miles away, he moved pieces across a board Mercer didn't even know he was standing on. Linda had no idea her brother had initiated a formal Department of Defense request. She only sensed a change in the air at St. Michael's, the kind of subtle, atmospheric shift nurses learned to read the same way they read vital signs. A tightening in conversations, administrators walking faster, security staff reviewing badges with unusual scrutiny. 2 weeks earlier, in a secure comms room with walls thick enough to swallow sonar signatures, Sean placed a call that would redirect the trajectory of the entire hospital. He spoke with the calm cadence of a man accustomed to clearance-level protocols, his tone clipped but respectful. When he gave his service number, the administrator on the other end paused, then shifted, audibly, into a more formal register. People did that when they realized they were speaking to someone from Naval Special Warfare. Sean laid out the exercise cleanly, Joint federal training, urban medical integration, St. Michael's selected as a high-value site. His voice never spiked, never wavered. The administrator hesitated only once, that small hitch in the throat just before asking about documentation. Sean had expected the question, "You will receive a complete package within 48 hours, he said. "This is pre-coordination only." He ended the call with the same quiet authority he used when ordering a team into a combat dive. Then he exhaled, a slow, controlled release through his nose. Webb watched him with a knowing look, arms crossed. And the paperwork did arrive, through official channels, with the correct seals, signatures, and distribution routing. Because Sean had gone through every legal step, every line item, every authorization request, nothing forged, nothing improvised. Nothing reckless, but legality and intent were two different worlds. The documents described a training scenario involving urban instability and medical facility response under simulated duress. Nothing unusual, nothing that would trigger oversight. Nowhere did it mention the unspoken objective, to place controlled pressure on one specific man, Mercer. At the hospital, the shift in his behavior was immediate, subtle at first, then increasingly visible. He moved through the corridors with a strange alertness, shoulders slightly raised, neck turning too often. His micro-expressions betrayed him, the rapid lateral eye movements, the jaw muscle flickering beneath the skin, the shallow breaths he tried unsuccessfully to mask. Linda noticed all of it. He snapped less, corrected her less. Avoid prolonged interactions. It wasn't kindness, it was fear, poorly camouflaged. Nurses whispered about his sudden unease. A tech joked, quietly, that Mercer looked like he was expecting to be audited, but it wasn't an audit that rattled him. It was the envelope that arrived at his doorstep, plain, unmarked, weightless except for the dread it carried. Inside, the photograph, high-angle perspective, rooftop vantage. Mercer stepping into the hospital, head slightly down, unaware. The composition too precise to be accidental, the lighting indicated early morning. Whoever had taken it understood surveillance angles and line of sight exposure. Mercer turned the photo over. The handwriting was block-lettered. Military neat, "We're watching you." His hands shook, not dramatically, but in micro-tremors he couldn't suppress. The kind seen in men who finally realized their imagined power was paper-thin. He had called the police, of course, and of course, they found nothing. No fingerprints, no DNA, no physical trace. The envelope was likely assembled with gloves and sealed using water brushed on with sterile gauze. Whoever sent it understood counterforensics. Mercer barely slept that night. He kept every light on. He checked the blinds every 30 minutes. His phone never left his palm. And every time he passed Linda in the hall, he looked at her with something new, something he tried to hide beneath authority but couldn't, recognition, something larger than him had entered his orbit. Something he could not control, something closing in. The first warning signs were small, almost dismissible, the kind of anomalies a hospital staff attributes to bureaucracy, audits, or routine compliance checks. But Linda felt them in her body before she understood them. A tightening in her throat when she turned a corner. A prickle down her spine when unfamiliar footsteps echoed behind her. The atmosphere at St. Michael's had changed, subtly at first, then unmistakably. The so-called assessors arrived on a Wednesday morning, quietly, without badges that meant anything to civilian eyes. They blended in just enough: jeans, polos, fleece jackets. Their movements, however, were unmistakable to anyone trained to see them. Purposeful, efficient, minimal wasted motion. They walked the corridors not like auditors, but like operators clearing a structure. Their eyes scanned overhead sprinklers, camera placements, blind spots near elevator banks. One paused beneath an exit sign and timed how long the motion sensor light stayed illuminated. Another knelt by a supply closet and measured hinge spacing. Administration tried to explain, using language heavy with federal jargon: compliance, infrastructure readiness, facility evaluation. But Linda noticed the micro details, the way they communicated without raising their voices, using hand gestures so subtle most people would miss them. The way they paused near reflective surfaces to check rearward movement. The way they avoided unnecessary conversation. These were not inspectors, these were Sean's people. Mercer felt it too. More than anyone, he carried a tension beneath his white coat that he could no longer mask. The skin around his eyes remained tight, as if he hadn't slept. His gait changed, shorter steps, shoulders slightly hunched, as though subconsciously reducing his target profile. He flinched when a nurse dropped a metal tray in radiology. His hand jerked toward his chest, fingers twitching as if he expected an impact. The hospital no longer bent around his authority, it pressed against him. Late in the afternoon, Linda was in the cafeteria stirring a cup of weak coffee, and one of the assessors approached. He looked like he'd been carved from granite, a massive man with shoulders that strained the seams of his jacket, a shaved head that caught the fluorescent light, and eyes that were startlingly calm, almost serene. He stood close enough that she felt the heat coming off him, but not close enough to invade her space. Controlled, respectful. "You're Carter," he said, his voice low, steady. It wasn't a question. Linda's fingers tightened around her cup. "Yes." He smiled, a small, brief expression, but real. "Your brother says hello." Before she could inhale enough air to speak, he was already walking away, disappearing between tables with a smoothness that didn't match his size. For a moment, the cafeteria nose faded into a dull hum. Her heartbeat filled the space. That night, she called Sean, her voice trembling in a way she hated. She demanded answers, demanded clarity, demanded anything but the silence he offered her. "What are you planning?" She whispered. "Nothing illegal," he said. The pause afterward was heavy, intentional. "Sean, trust me, Linda, just trust me." She lay awake in the dark, staring at the ceiling, counting the seconds between her breaths. Trust was easy when things were simple. It was harder, and she didn't recognize the world around her. 3 days before the scheduled exercise, Mercer found another envelope waiting on his doorstep. He scanned the street before picking it up, eyes darting from tree shadows to parked cars. No movement, no witnesses. Inside the envelope was a single packet of paper. His schedule, every shift, every patient consultation, every department meeting, every coffee break. Not approximations, timestamps accurate to the minute. Someone had tracked him for 2 weeks with a precision that made his skin crawl. He marched into the hospital director's office, slamming the papers onto the desk with enough force to rattle a pen holder. His hands trembled, not from rage, from something far colder. "Someone is stalking me." The director skimmed the pages, eyes widening slightly before lowering his voice. "We'll increase security. You don't understand." Mercer leaned forward, his breathing shallow, pupils constricted to pinpoints. "They know everything, every step I take, every move I make." "Who?" the director asked gently. Mercer opened his mouth, then closed it, his throat bobbed. He couldn't answer because there was no name he could safely say out loud, but he had a suspicion. That night, he sat alone in his kitchen, the light above the sink flickering. His laptop glowed in the dark as he typed one search term after another. Navy SEAL intimidation tactics, psychological operations training, military surveillance capabilities. By dawn, he was still there, eyes bloodshot, a cold cup of coffee untouched on the table. He didn't sleep that night. The moment the lights caught, the hum of the hospital's ventilation seemed to vanish. Red emergency lights ignited like a warning flare, washing the corridors in a sterile, bloody glow. Linda's hands hovered over the vitals monitor, pulse readings frozen mid-display. The announcement boomed, each word precise, clipped, mechanically rehearsed. "Urban hostile intercept training is now in effect." Her chest tightened, ribcage constricting as if anticipating impact. Every fiber of her body recognized the protocol. Every muscle tensed, not in panic, but in acute readiness. On the 3rd floor, Mercer froze mid-step, hand on the doorknob of a patient's room. His pupils dilated, heartbeat lurching as the words reverberated against the walls. He swallowed and felt the blood recede from his extremities. Years of authority, years of unchallenged power, collapsed inward in the instant he understood the drill's intent. The elevator chimed, doors sliding open with clinical precision. 4 operators emerged, black tactical uniforms cutting shadows into the corridor, helmets glinting under the red emergency light. Night vision units, faintly illuminated, swept mechanically. Rifles held low but ready, orange training markers glinting, a deceptive signal of safety. Their formation was textbook, silent spacing, controlled pace, synchronization, refined by countless hours of field ops. Hand signals snapped across the corridor like semaphore, an unspoken language. Mercer's instincts screamed. He bolted down the hall, sneakers scuffing against linoleum. His body moved on pure adrenaline, legs pumping, arms swinging in reflex. Past the nurse's station, around corners, into the stairwell. Footfalls echoed behind him. Measured, deliberate. Not chasing, hurting, predicting his trajectory and guiding it. His chest constricted, each breath tasted metallic, shallow, ragged. The stairwell spat him into a storage room, a dead end. He spun, hands raised, face pale. Four operators emerged from the shadows, weapons trained, the barrels aligned with the natural sway of his terrified stance. Micro-expressions flashed across Mercer's face. Eye twitch, nostril flare, lip pulled in a thin line. His body betrayed every ounce of panic he tried to contain. Contact, one operator said, into the radio. Target acquired, Sector 7. Mercer's mouth opened, tried to form protest. This is a drill, you can't, hands visible. Do not move, came the reply. I'm a doctor. I'm not part of this. Red laser dots crisscrossed his chest. Flashlights danced, each sweep illuminating the terror etched across his features. Every syllable of authority he had wielded for decades evaporated into airless panic. The footsteps behind him slowed. The formation parted, revealing a fifth figure. No helmet, no rifle. Just the measured calm of someone who knew every variable before it unfolded. Mercer's eyes widened, pulse stuttering. Recognition sliced through the fog of fear. Those eyes, cold, controlled, unwavering, belonged to the sister he had ignored, the nurse he had belittled. But more importantly, they belonged to the man who orchestrated the storm. Sean Carter advanced, 3 feet separating predator from prey, each step deliberate, measured. His presence radiated authority, without aggression. Mercer's throat bobbed. His hands shook ever so slightly, fingers twitching at the edge of control. Dr. Mercer, Sean said quietly, voice low, composed. Each word landed with surgical precision, a scalpel through pretense. We need to talk about my sister. Mercer's shoulders sagged imperceptibly, microticks betraying his internal collapse. He was caught in a web of professional protocol, legal boundaries, and lethal precision. No one could see the fear as acutely as Sean, and Mercer knew it. Not just because of the SEAL operators surrounding him, not just because of the tactical exercise, but because of the quiet, surgical authority in the man's voice, a calm storm, ready to execute consequences with flawless legality. Mercer's chest rose and fell in shallow, rapid pulls. His hands twitched near the wall, nails digging faint crescents into the paint. Every instinct, every learned defense, every habitual arrogance of his career was stripped bare by controlled precision, by legal leverage, by operational mastery. Sean didn't move a muscle beyond the calculated 3 steps. Eyes locked, pulse unreadable, presence dominant. Mercer realized, in a wave that washed through every nerve ending, that nothing he had wielded, influence, seniority, expertise, would shield him. Not here, not now. Not against the methodical, lawful, and lethal orchestration of someone who had all the authority he lacked, and more. Mercer's legs trembled violently, the fibers quivering beneath his trousers until they gave way entirely. He slid down the wall, a crumpled figure in a white coat, hands raised in an instinctive surrender. The fluorescent red emergency lights cast harsh shadows across his face, highlighting the twitch in his right eyelid, the shallow, uneven rise of his chest. He swallowed repeatedly, each gulp sounding unnaturally loud in the confined storage room, the taste of iron on his tongue. This is insane. This is assault. I'll have you court-martialed. His voice cracked halfway through the sentence, a brittle tremor betraying the absolute erosion of authority he had relied on for decades. Sean crouched, deliberately bringing himself to Mercer's level, voice smooth, almost conversational, but weighted with inexorable control. For what? Each word was precise, measured, unhurried. This is a federally authorized training exercise. You are a simulated hostile civilian. Everything occurring right now is documented, approved, and legal. Sean's eyes scanned Mercer's face, noting the micro-expressions, the twitch at the corner of the eye, the minute flare of the nostrils, the subtle tightening of the jaw. All involuntary, all signs of someone unmoored. I've spent 12 years learning how to break enemy combatants without leaving a mark, Sean continued, tone calm, but edged with a quiet authority that brooked no interruption. Without crossing a line, without giving lawyers any leverage. Do you think a hospital bully is a challenge for me? Mercer's lips quivered. Tears threatened the edges of his eyes. I didn't know she was telling the truth. You didn't care. Sean's voice hardened, words clipped, precise, each syllable sinking like a scalpel. You targeted her because she was young, alone, vulnerable, because you've been doing it for years, and nobody stopped you. Sean's hand moved deliberately, retrieving a manila folder from the floor. He slid it across the linoleum to land squarely in Mercer's lap. Mercer's eyes widened, pupils dilating as he forced himself to glimpse the contents. 3 previous complaints, Sean said quietly, almost conversationally, all buried. All settled under NDAs and severance packages, all young women. Mercer's face drained of color, almost as if the red light had been physically siphoned from him. How did you? I have resources you can't imagine. Sean stood, his posture immaculate, commanding without aggression. Here's what happens now. You have 2 choices. He raised one finger. Option 1. You resign. Effective immediately. You leave this hospital tonight. You never contact my sister again. You never work in a position of authority over young staff again. He raised the second finger. Deliberate. Option 2. I make a phone call. Tomorrow morning, 3 federal agencies begin investigating your personnel files, your financial records, your browser history. He paused, eyes locked on Mercer's, letting the weight of inevitability settle. We both know what they'll find. Mercer's hands shook uncontrollably, curling into fists, then opening again, unable to maintain control. Saliva gathered at the back of his throat. You can't do this. This is blackmail. This is consequence. Sean interjected, sharp but measured, eyes glinting with a quiet professional coldness. He pivoted toward the doorway and signaled with a subtle hand gesture. The operators, still in formation, lowered their weapons in controlled synchronicity and filed out with precision, their boots silent against the floor tiles, leaving Mercer in absolute, crushing isolation. Sean paused at the threshold, hands in pockets, one foot forward. You have until midnight to decide. After that, I decide for you. The statement hung in the air, legally and morally undeniable. He walked out, leaving Mercer alone. The red light reflected across empty metal shelves, amplifying the silence. The smell of antiseptic mingled with the metallic tang of adrenaline that still coursed through Mercer's system. His career, built over decades of strategic maneuvering and professional dominance, had ended in less than an hour, and yet the method of its collapse, precise, legal, unstoppable, was worse than any direct attack he could have imagined. He sat, shivering, fists slackening, eyes tracing the ceiling tiles. His hands trembled, not from fear alone, but from the realization that he had been entirely outmaneuvered. He didn't know which way to go, only that every path forward had vanished. By midnight, Dr. Stephen Mercer had submitted his resignation. The letter was clinical, perfunctory, personal reasons, effective immediately. The word sat on the screen like a death notice, sterile and final. Mercer's office, once a shrine to authority, now felt hollow. The hum of the air conditioning seemed louder, the shadows longer. His chair, pushed back, bore the imprint of a man undone. He stared at the empty desk, fists curled on his knees, the tick in his right eye betraying the panic he could not articulate. By morning, the corridors of St. Michael's pulsed with whispered reports. Nurses, orderlies, and residents exchanged fragments of the story. Federal exercise, SEAL team, Mercer cornered, Mercer gone. None knew the specifics, none dared ask. All eyes flicked toward Linda Carter. She stood at the nurse's station, posture straight, hands folded lightly on the countertop, a model of quiet control. Her expression gave nothing, but her gaze swept the room, noting every hesitant movement, every micro-expression of relief, fear, or envy. The whispers dulled, replaced by cautious curiosity. Everything had shifted, imperceptibly but irreversibly. Colleagues who had skirted her, avoiding eye contact, now approached with tentative smiles. Their voices waver under scrutiny. We always believed you. one said, though the word believed carried the hollow weight of a confession rather than truth. Linda's lips barely curved. She did not respond. The message was silent but potent. Trust, respect, and authority were not granted by words. They were observed, earned, and, in this room, finally acknowledged. The hospital director summoned her. The office smelled faintly of coffee and disinfectant, the latter a sterile reminder of the environment they had failed to safeguard. She entered, hands folded on her lap, posture straight, voice neutral. "Miss Carter, Linda. I want to personally apologize," he began, voice careful, measured, like a negotiator stepping over an unmarked minefield. She sat, letting the pause stretch, observing the subtle shifts in his demeanor, the micro-twitch at the corner of his mouth, the shallow inhale before his next words. "For what, sir?" Her tone was quiet, but edged with steel. He shifted, fidgeted slightly with a pen, avoiding eye contact. "Dr. Mercer's behavior was, we should have addressed it sooner. The hospital takes harassment very seriously, does it?" Her words were soft but unforgiving, pressing like the barrel of a firearm against a target's temple. Silence followed, thick and deliberate. 3 women filed complaints against him. You promoted him twice. Mercer's past shield, once impenetrable, crumbled in this moment. The director's face reddened, a subtle burn of shame, of the cognitive dissonance between policy and practice. Those situations were complex, no. Her voice rose fractionally, not in anger, but in surgical precision. They were simple. You protected him because he was valuable. You sacrificed us because we were replaceable. She rose from the chair, every movement deliberate, commanding. She moved toward the door, hands brushing the edge, spine straight, eyes unwavering. "I'm not quitting, sir. I love nursing. I worked too hard to let one bully take that from me." A final glance over her shoulder, measure, assured. "But I'll be watching how you handle the next complaint, and so will my brother." The words landed with the weight of a verdict, silent yet absolute. She exited, leaving the director alone, hands clenched on the desk, perspiration forming at his temple. The office felt smaller, the consequences of past negligence pressing down with unyielding clarity. The phone rang, a known number. He did not answer. His fingers hovered over the receiver, but he could not summon the courage. He stared at the blank screen, the quiet professional advocacy of Sean Carter known, omnipresent, looming larger than any disciplinary policy, larger than Mercer's entire career. The diner sat low against the darkening highway, its neon sign flickering in irregular pulses that cast faint blue bands across the rain-streaked windows. Sean chose a booth in the corner, back to the wall, line of sight to both exits, without even thinking about it. Muscle memory, habit. A life lived in threat assessments and silent calculations. Linda slid into the seat across from him. Her movements were careful, controlled. The way someone behaves in their mind is replaying something faster than they can process. She wrapped both hands around the warm ceramic mug, as if grounding herself. For a long stretch of seconds, she said nothing. Only the faint clink of her spoon tapping the cup revealed the tremor she was trying to suppress. "You terrified him," she finally said, voice quiet but not fragile. Sean didn't blink. Yes, he thought he was going to die. A slight lift of his shoulders, half shrug, half acknowledgement. "Probably." Linda stirred her coffee again. The liquid swirled in tight concentric circles, her fingers stiff on the handle. "Was it legal? Actually legal?" Sean didn't hesitate. "Federally authorized training exercise." His tone was calm, almost clinical. "We do them at hospitals, airports, schools. Emergency response drills. All paperwork was legitimate." She looked up then, eyes narrowing, searching his face for anything: guilt, uncertainty, second thoughts. She found none. "But you manipulated it," she said. "You made him the target." "I designated him as a hostile civilian for the simulation," he replied. "Standard protocol." Her jaw flexed, a soft tightening near her ear, the tell he always recognized. "You planned this for weeks. I planned it the night you told me his name." Silence settled between them, heavy, not hostile, just laden with things unsaid. Linda exhaled slowly. "Why didn't you just talk to administration, report him through official channels?" Sean's expression remained steady, but something colder crept into his gaze. Would that have worked? The question hit harder than his voice implied. Linda thought of the complaints: 3 women, 3 signed NDAs, 3 careers quietly shuffled away to keep Mercer's spotless. She thought of the director's sweating face, the way he struggled to defend the indefensible. "No," she whispered. "Then you have your answer." Her hand moved across the table, hesitant at first, then firm as she closed her fingers around his. His remained still beneath her, solid, warm, but unmoving, as if unsure he had the right to respond. She squeezed. "Thank you," she murmured. A muscle jumped in Sean's jaw. He didn't look away, but his breathing shifted, slightly shallower, slightly uneven. "A crack in the armor. I wasn't there." "Linda," his voice was rough, frayed at the edges. For years, birthdays, graduations, his throat tightened before the next words pushed through. "When Mom died." Linda's lips pressed together, eyes softening. Sean's gaze dropped to the table for the briefest moment, a rare break in his guarded composure. "I wasn't there," he repeated. "This was the least I could do." Linda tightened her grip, anchoring him. "You were always there. Every voicemail I left. Every text you couldn't answer. I knew you were listening." Sean didn't respond, but his fingers shifted, brushing against hers in a silent admission. "And besides," Linda added, a small smile forming, "most big brothers just threaten bullies. Mine deploys a tactical team." A quiet sound escaped Sean, half laugh, half exhale. The tension in his shoulders eased, the first visible softening since he'd walked in. "Slight overkill?" he asked. "Slight," she said, matching his tone. For a moment, they simply sat there, two siblings, one world apart and yet closer than they'd been in years, the hum of the diner fading around them. 6 months had passed, 6 months of recalibration, of shadows receding from hallways that once whispered with fear. Linda Carter walked through the administrative wing with the calm gait of someone who no longer second-guessed her own competence. Her badge now marked charge nurse caught a glint of the early morning light, a muted reflection that seemed to affirm everything she had fought for. She hadn't asked for respect, she had earned it. The hospital had transformed in ways both visible and hidden beneath procedural language. Mandatory reporting modules, quarterly evaluations, a third-party oversight board, posters with hotline numbers discreetly placed near staff rooms. None of it born from moral revelation. Change had come from pressure, silent, watchful pressure. A pressure shaped like a SEAL commander who knew how to make institutions tremble without ever raising his voice. Linda stepped into her office, still small, still cluttered, but hers now. Something on the desk caught her attention. A small brown package, unmarked, the taped edges cut with military precision. She paused, fingertips hovering a moment as her pulse gave a single, heavy beat. Not fear, recognition. She opened it slowly. Inside, resting on dark foam, lay a Navy SEAL trident pin. Gold, weighty, real. It wasn't new. The faint scratches on the metal were the kind that came only from real missions. Atop it lay a folded note, the handwriting sharp and deliberate. "The only easy day was yesterday. Proud of you." As her throat tightened, not dramatically, just a slight constriction, a pause in her breathing that made her blink twice before the air returned. She closed the note carefully and slid the trident inside her badge holder, behind her credentials where no one else would see it. A private oath, a private reminder. She carried it with her the rest of the shift, a silent weight over her heart. Hours later, as the night shift transitioned into dawn, Linda stood outside the hospital entrance. The sky cracked open with streaks of pink and pale gold, the sun rising with the same quiet determination that had carried her through the last 6 months. The cold morning air brushed her cheeks, but she didn't flinch. She watched the light expand, steady and patient. Footsteps approached, quick and uncertain. "Excuse me," a young voice asked. Linda turned. A girl, maybe mid-20s, stood near the curb, clutching a thin folder to her chest, shoulders slightly hunched. Eyes scanning everything at once, breathing shallow. The unmistakable look of someone stepping into a world that felt too large for her. "I'm starting today," the girl said. I don't know where to go." Linda's expression softened. The smallest lift at the corner of her mouth, a warmth that wasn't forced. She recognized the posture, the fear behind the stiff smile, the way the girl's fingers tightened on the folder every few seconds, a nervous microtremor she remembered well. "Come with me," Linda said. "I'll show you everything." Relief crossed the girl's face, a brief exhale. shoulders lowering a fraction. They walked through the automatic doors together, Linda guiding her with the steady presence she once wished someone had given her. Outside, across the driveway, a black SUV idled. Engine low, windows tinted, Sean sat behind the wheel, one hand resting on it, the other drumming a slow, thoughtful rhythm against his thigh. He watched his sister through the glass as she led the new nurse inside, her posture confident, her steps measured and sure. Something eased in his face, a subtle unclenching near the jawline, the soft rise of his shoulders as tension left them. He nodded once, no smile, no wave, just acknowledgement. Then he shifted the SUV into gear and pulled away from the curb, disappearing into the thinning night. Some battles were fought with weapons, some with presence. And some may be the most important to her one simply by showing up. If you enjoyed this story and want more powerful narratives like this, make sure to subscribe to the channel.